I'm my own chair, so let's start with my lecture today. After Jesus focusing in models, I will focus in how to manage data from social media. So this is the title, this is me, we know each other. Yo avisé, pero no sé si falta gente. Llega a ser la campana. Hay que ir con el cencerro. Ya sabía. Well, any question? Ese cencerro es de acá. Well, I'm surely you know some details of my academic profile, but I'm in the physics department of the University of Buenos Aires. And I work in the social physics lab. Here is the webpage. And you also can follow some our updates in Twitter. So, there is no button there. First, I will start with some framework in which I'm going to present my lecture. But the first issue when we deal with the social analysis is it is possible to quantify human behavior, and if not at a whole, under what circumstances or which aspect of human behavior can be quantified. And the fact that it's traditionally during election, we have a large-scale picture of at least one important thing about some behavior, some opinion, and on a whole population. That is, we have the results of the elections, and we can collect. And this is a way in which people, for example, following the water model or some of the model that the Jesus explained today, they express in favor of one or other political parties. But the traditional way to quantify opinion in the more elaborate form is through surveys. And there is also many pages and with many data about specific surveys. But the problem with surveys are they are relatively focused on small groups or no larger as a population. In that sense, the emergence of social media, it changed the picture in the last years. In two ways. The first change is in the formation, is that the public life, of the public opinions, moved to the social media. So we express each other, and the politician and all the political actors and the public actors express in social media, in different social media. And so the formation, we have the formation of new collective states mediated by networks, but also as researchers or as people that is interested in that kind of topics, we have access to large amount of data. And how can we deal with this? And well, one of the dominant collective behavior that was mentioned by Jesus in the model of Bauman was the formation of collective states is the political polarization. Political polarization as a macroscopic state when we have at least two groups that think with a different way. And that is important. This is an important topic because political polarization is growing on time from this distribution. This is a study from Pew Research, and I don't know if you know the web page is an organization that I used to collect data through surveys, and this is a study that they focus in this web page. They focus in the evolution of polarization in the United States from 1994 to 2017. And we can see how this polarization, understanding as a bimodal distribution in this opinion, in this political dimension, that is the political dimension, the classical political dimension, the easy one, that is the left to right, it's going separate apart. And the problem with polarization is that it not remains in surveys, but also has consequence in real life, as for instance, this article that reports how it's produced segregation in the way that people choose their neighbors to live. So there is neighbors Republican and neighbors Democrats. So the topic of the lecture is, can polarization be detected from structure of social media? Can we move from stop asking what people say to report polarization from surveys to report polarization analyzing who interacts with whom? Can we go from this frame to this kind of pictures? And I'm going to present you some relevant papers of the last 10 years. I have to do, no, I can do this. It's not a problem of battery, it's a problem that okay. Technical issues. Okay. Yes. So this is the roadmap of the talk. I'm going to present basically 5 types of research. These research are, one is polarization from political polarization from structure. The other is polarization estimated via latent geometry approach. Then I'm going to speak about echo chambers, as Jesus mentioned, and finally, information ecosystem. And you can see here that many of the topics I'm going to present are related with the data and the projects that are available for that you are working. So, what kind of data do we have? We have, for instance, some of you are already analyzing the retweets network, in which users spread content that typically endorse the message they're retweeting. We have mentioned in which users engage in a conversation. We have the follower-following network. That is the backbone of Twitter. It's with all this happen. We have shares when users share some information. It could be news, for instance, for the groups that are analyzing the bipartisan news. Or we can have posts in other social media or in Facebook, for instance, or comments as in YouTube. We have this kind of data, and the important thing is this kind of data we are going to represent as networks, trying to reflect some collective behaviors. This kind of network we are going to present, they are not static networks, but they are representation of collective behavior. So, the first paper we are going to analyze is this one, that is from the group of Filippo Menzer in Indiana. And is the first study of in which they study political polarization in Twitter. This is from 2011. And this is the whole reference. I don't know if you have access to in the page of the school. In the part of lectures, I put a link with a folder with several papers. This is there, if you want. So, they use a combination of network clustering and manually annotated data. They use data and metadata from the data, by redundancia, to analyze and how to infer political polarization from networks. And if we want to summarize the main research question of this paper, there are these 3 research questions. Can political alignment be inferred from the network structure, not from from question or from surveys as before. Does interaction type modulate polarization? I mean, it's the same if we analyze the mention network as the retweet networks. Can modularity recover ideology? Can we use modularity to infer ideology? Well, this is the data, and we are going to see how the size of the data scales with years. But they collect Twitter during 6 weeks previous to election, to the midterm election in the United States in 2010. They focus on tweet with political content. So how we do that? We just pick some hashtag related to political content, and because we are not sure that if we put all the hashtag we need, it's usually to do the network of co-hashtag. So we analyze which hashtag co-occur with those we chosen, and we try to select the rest of hashtag in that way. This is the size of the data set. This is 250,000 tweets. And then construct these two type of networks. They construct the retweet networks, in which if user B retweets a tweet of user A, there is a direct edge from A to B. The edge is in the sense of the flow of information. And they also construct the mention network, in which there is a direct edge if B mentioned A. Okay? So this is how the network looks like. This is a representation with a type of spring layout that try to put together the nodes with more weights and far apart with those with less weight. And this is the number of the sizes of the network. We can see here that the number of total nodes in the retweet network is much larger than the number of the mention network. So it's more important the retweet network than the mention network. And if you go to the data set I provide to you, you are going to see that the number also are share this asymmetric property. And this is the non-isolated nodes, the size of the main number of the data sets, and so on. So, which is the first analysis of this data? Well, as Johan explained in the first class, they calculate the community structure. I mean, they run an algorithm of community detection. They use a label propagation method, not a domain, but another one. And they perform a two-cluster recognition because they are working with political tweets and they're in a bipartite system, Republicans and Democrats. Their answer is that they have the relevant, it has to be two clusters. But you can see here the structure of the retweet networks, and this is the structure of the mention network. This is, I don't know if this is could be, but this is here a small partition that the algorithm finds. But we can see here a clearly structure of two big clusters that dominates the retweet network, and there is a whole bunch of nodes that is the mention network. So we can see here some small structure, but they don't focus in this structure. And this is the modularity. You remember the Newman-Gilbert modularity that also you have seen with Johan in the first class, and how the modularity is the modularity of the retweet network is higher than the modularity of the mention network. So, which is the second step? We have two. The next question is: there are homogeneous in some aspects that this cluster, which each cluster represents. So, in order to study how the content homogeneities in each cluster, they define for each user a vector hashtag. You imagine that for each user we have a vector. Each cell of the vector is a given hashtag, and the number of in each component is the number of tweets with each hashtag. So we can build a hashtag vector, and we can calculate the mean similarity between all nodes, and this is the plot of the mean similarity or the distribution similarity for cluster A, cluster B, and the different clusters. And we can see here that the users in cluster A are more similar than users in cluster B, and the users in different clusters are the least similar to each other. And this is clear for this network, but that's in the mentioned network, they're all mixed together. So the next step was, okay, our answer did this, that this cluster are related with political election, with the pertinencia política, with the party they choose. So how are they are going to prove this result? How are they going to be sure that this is true? Well, they perform a qualitative content analysis in which they choose 1,000 random users, and the author classify them as less identity of the votant of Democrats or supportive from the Republicans or other user that they can't classify. They make that this classification is also revised by an expert in the field, and this is and then in base of this 1,000 random user, they see how is the political affiliation of each node. And this is the number here. We can see here that in the retweet network, 93% of the nodes are Republican, are Republican voters, and 80% of the node in the blue one, there are Democrats. Okay, and this distribution is more or more likely in the mentioned network. Okay. The other thing is the interaction analysis, in which they try to see if the users, the Republican users, are more likely to retweet Republican content and vice versa. So in that way, they perform this analysis. They choose a certain amount of links that are seeded in Republican nodes, and they calculate the fraction of these links that go to Republican or to Democrat nodes. And this calculates this number using this formula here, and we can see here that in the retweet networks, left user tend to retweet left content, and right user tend to retweet right content. I mean, there is also a polarization in the interaction between users. So this is the first analysis, the first step, but clusters are discrete, and the political preference could be mapped in the continuous line. So it is possible to infer ideology as a continuous variable from the connectivity pattern of Twitter. This is a question that was addressed in the two papers that I'm going to show you now. And the idea is this: we have, suppose that we have this network, we have some elite node of politicians, a count of politicians, of the relevant actors that we know the political affiliation, and we have user, and we have this kind of bipartite networks. The question is, can we estimate political ideology just from Twitter behavior? Just what can see here from this? We have seen this doing this cluster analysis, but these people choose another method. And here the idea is that if we have a group of users that is following a given political behavior of some party, this is because they probably have the same ideology or their similar ideology. And the question is the ideology is modulating the connectivity. By looking the connectivity, can we infer the ideology? This is the question that posed one Pablo Barbera in this paper from 2014. And in order to do that, he developed a Bayesian latent variable in which they postulate that the ideology, can we infer, the ideology is a latent variable, that is a variable that is not explicitly there, but it can be expressed from the pattern of connectivity just by assuming that is homophiling the connectivity. Homophiling in the sense Jesus said before. I mean that similar persons tend to like to interact each other. So, the data is this. He, in these papers, analyzed several data sets, but this is the number of the United States data set. He chose almost 300 politicians and almost 300,000 users. And he just mapped the following follower network. See? And this matrix of following follower can be represented in a bipartite network. This is a bipartite adjacent matrix in which we have here the users, we have here the politician, and each cell of the matrix is 1 if the user I follow the politician P. Okay? And this is the data. They, of course, they perform side data filtering. They discard users that have sent fewer than 100 tweets. They have not sent, also discard users that have not sent one tweet in the past 6 months, and also irrelevant users because of have a few followers or because they are out of the country. Okay? And then they formulate a model, a statistical model. This is this expression here. This assumes that a user Twitter has this is the identity of E stands for the user, Twitter user, J stands for political actors, and theta sub E and phi sub phi J is the ideal point is the coordinate in the latent space. They assume that there is a latent space in 1 dimension, and user E has a coordinate there. User politician J has another coordinate that he calls Vj. And these are the ideology, okay, this and this are the ideology. And in this space, it is possible to calculate the distance between these 2 ideologies. And the hypothesis is the closer they are, the more probably they have to, the more probably it has to be connected. But there also are 2 ingredients, alpha J and beta E, in which alpha J means the probability of the popularity of the politician. I mean, it's the problem that we follow a more probable politician than a less probable one. And beta sub E is a measure of the political interest of the user. So he modeled this probability as a logistic function. This goes to 1 with the arguments go to infinity. So the probability of this function is 1 when the argument goes to plus infinity. So on that way, we have to minimize the distance and maximize the number of the probabilities. And they also, they basically infer the parameters using the Bayesian approach. They write down here the likelihood function, and they then estimate the parameter using a Bayesian approach. And that way, he obtained the coordinates in the latent space from politicians and for users. Which is the first step you do when you have these results? I have to check it out. It's okay what the method is giving to me. So the easy way to test this is to check if the ideology, the method obtained for politician, is what is expected. So here, he compared the ideology estimate from the model with another source of ideology. Which is the source of ideology? The ideology, this is what they call DW nominate. That is a score that is based in the roll calling behavior in the voting, in the way the politician vote in the cameras. This is in the House, in the deputies, and this is in the Senate. And we can see here that this method provides a very good agreement. And this also represents here some known users. For instance, here is Barack Obama. This is the New York Times. This is, for instance, for here is Mitt Romney, that was the candidate against Barack Obama in 2012. And he can compare and he can validate his method. So this is important, an important part of this. We have to validate this method. The next step was to do a retweet analysis, or how they analyze some of the content, how the people retweet tweets. In that way, they they look for tweets that mention Obama or Rumi, what's the main candidate of the two parties, and they check all the users that retweets those candidates. Because they have the ideology of the users, they can plot the number of retweets as a function of the ideology of the users. And they can see here that there's a bimodal distribution in the tweets mentioning Obama, that's in the tweets mentioning Rumi. So, could we extract more information from there or not? What do you think? Remember that negative score is for Democrats, and positive score is for Republicans. So, this is the tweets mention Obama, okay? And the tweets mention Obama, they're more retweeted for users with ideology positive, that's the ideology of the Republican. You think that they are mentioned, the Republicans are positive mention Obama or negative mention Obama? What do you think? Negative mention. The same happened here, okay? That even though there is no sentiment analysis there, we can infer there that there is a negative kind of version, a negative kind of message in this retweeting retweeting behavior, okay? This is not a hard result, but this is a hypothesis that we can test. And here, because they have also the ideology of the user that generates the tweets and the ideology of the user that retweets the content, they can plot the density of users that the density of user discriminated by the ideology, comparing the users with the retweeters, the tweets with the retweeters, okay? I mean, this is a tweet generated by a Republican user, and these are mostly retweeted by other political, Republican retweeters. It's the same for Democrats. And this is a proxy that they don't address this problem here, but it is a proxy what also Jesus told before, that is a kind of echo chambers analysis. I mean, retweeters are interacted, Republican retweeters are mainly interacting with Republican users. So there is a kind of inbreeding in these two groups. The problem with this model is that to find the parameter using this Bayesian model is hard to scale. I mean, it's hard to scale with the number. So they published another paper in the next year with another coworker, and then they revisit this, but with a different way of calculate the latent ideology, and they also address more data sets and address also the topic of the data set. They analyze, as I said here, the Bayesian approach becomes computationally inefficient. And instead, using this model, they found that they can calculate the latent ideology using correspondent analysis to estimate the latent ideology. And they investigate this conversation. They select tweets related with a given conversation that they can classify in two main categories, political or non-political one. Basically, to perform correspondence analysis is a single value decomposition of the standardized matrix. They depart basically from the bipartite network from the followers following users. Imagine that this is the agency matrix, and they normalize the agency matrix to have probabilities, and they calculate the mass vector of files and columns, take the diagonal, and calculate the standardized residual matrix, like here, in which we can see here that this is the probability matrix, the agency matrix, minus the how it's going could be the matrix if users and politicians make independent behavior. This is a kind of null hypothesis. This is weighted with the square root of the diagonal matrix. And then they perform a single value decomposition from this matrix, and the standardized coordinates on the first component is the latent ideology. Once they do that, they say, okay, let's plot this coordinate, this ideology coordinate against an ideology estimate, as in the previous case, in the roll call, from the roll call behavior. And they found a very good agreement. In fact, this has a 0.9 of a correlation. This is a correlation just for separated by Republican and Democrat, but they can see here that they also can estimate very well the coordinates of the member of the Congress, okay? And also, they make another estimation because they have metadata from some users, and they can check that some of the users, they take, I don't know if 100 or 1,000 users or more, I don't remember exactly the names, but with this name, they could be to the database and feed it, they are registered as Republican or Democrats, and they can do this distribution of ideology estimated from this method with the label of registered Republican or registered Democrat. And they can see here that they can separate, the method can separate well the population of users. They also calculate the distribution of retweets between the ideology and the user and the ideology of the retweeter, and they can see here that this arises some kinds of clouds there that is resembling this echo chamber behavior of the collective. This is a kind of polarization of inbreeding. These are all political topics. This is data related with election, with the budget of the government, with the marriage equality, minimum salary, etc. Okay? And this is what happened with other topics that are not so are political related. And we can see here that there's a first appreciation that there may be this echo chamber are more likely to appear in political discussion than in non-political discussion. They also calculate the retweet networks in the context of the presidential election and in the context of Super Bowl discussion. And we can see here that even though both are the retweet networks, if the discussion is political, there is two big clusters appear, but if the discussion is not political, maybe there is not a polarization in terms of the structure of the network. So we can infer here polarization from, we have seen two different methods to infer polarization from the data. This is more likely to found in the retweet network, but also if the retweet network is related to political discussion and not others. So, the previous papers just show us that the possibility of having echo chambers, and there are some very nice papers that address this question. One of them is authored by Silvio Ferreira here, and the other by Michele Starnini. It's going to be next week in the workshop that Silvio is organizing. Basically, the formal definition of echo chamber is they can be defined as environment in which the user opinion about a given topic are reinforced to repeated interactions with peers that similar tendencies. I mean, it's not just that we have polarization, but also are a reinforcing of the interactions. Why? Which could be the mechanisms that give rise to them? Well, there are some mechanisms that are known before the rising of social media. One of them is selective exposure, in which we choose which kind of media we want to get to be informed. And the other is confirmation bias, that which is the people's tendency to process information that is consistent with our own belief. Okay, we don't want to have dissonance, and we prefer to speak with people that we feel comfortable. And this could be the mechanism behind the formation of echo chambers. The main contribution of these two papers, I will focus on one of them, is that they provide a mechanism to quantify echo chambers. Okay? And they quantify echo chamber based in two features that can be empirically measured. One of these is the inference of the user stance, of the user leaning about a given issue. They provide a method to calculate this stance, and also the structure of the social interaction of the platforms. And they're going to check the presence of echo chambers by checking homophily in the interactions related to a specific issue, and also they're going to look at the bias in the diffusion of information. Okay? So, how they calculate the user stance is basically in the different social media, they choose users and they look the content they create. It could be their post, it could be their like a something post, it could be the tweets. Just for instance, just assumes that they're the tweets. And just assume that we can, for instance, estimate the stance in a given continuous variable with a range between -1 or +1. Just for instance, we are going to provide more details. Then we assume that this post has a coordinate that is close to +1, and this one of these posts has a coordinate that is close to -0.8, for instance. Okay? And they basically take over each user the average of this activity if each post can be classified with this variable. It's okay for you? Well, as was shown also by Jesus earlier, polarization can be evaluated. We can see polarization if a given topic we assist a modal distribution of this variable. Okay? If this stand has a bimodal distribution, we can see that part of the population has one opinion and part of the population have other opinion. Okay? But also, they're going to analyze homophily in the interactions. Okay. The interesting thing here is they don't analyze a given data set. You know, they analyze a lot of data sets that came from 4 different social media. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit so far, Gab, I didn't know. But they analyze Gab. I don't know what. I check it out, but I never use. Some of you have used one of Reddit or Gab. Reddit, yes. Gab? Something? No. Okay. And these are the numbers, and we can see here that they also, you know, when users, we don't collect Twitter anymore since Elon Musk is the owner. But previous to the Elon Musk period, one can apply with a scientific project to say, I want to study Twitter data. We have a proposal, and we submit a proposal, and we collect data, a lot of data. And the way to collect data from Twitter, there's basically 2 ways. You can collect tweets given with a filter of keywords. So I want all the tweets that mention that keywords, or we can follow, give me the data from these specific users. And we have made research following the 2 methods, okay? And here, the tweeters are related with 3 topics that are controversial. There are topics that is expected to be polarization. One is gun control. The government has to implement a control of the possession of guns or not. Then it's about Obamacare. I don't know if you know what Obamacare is, but it's a plan of President Obama to give some more public health to the people. The Republicans very strong with Obamacare. And the other one was if abortion has to be legal or not. And also, Facebook, there are data sets related with science, with publication pages related from science, scientific publication, validated scientific publication, or pages related with conspiracy pages. Also, with the topic vaccines, people are pro-vaccines or anti-vaccines, and you're also collecting just users that they share news, okay? And also in Reddit, these subreddits topics that are the politics, the Donald, we know who is the Donald. It's not the Pato Donald, Donald Duck. And the news, in Gab, they analyze Gab as a whole because maybe this has some data. And this is how they analyze the data in these 2 main social media. In Twitter, they follow the content created by different users, but they focus from this user in which post they post a given news from a media outlet, okay? And they check what is the leaning on the stance of this media outlet. This is the C variable. And then they calculate the average of the media shared by every user, and they calculate the stance of the user. Okay? And from Facebook, they infer the user style in the way they like post. They classify post, for instance, in the vaccine topics, if there are pro-vax or anti-vax, and if they like a pro-vax post, they infer that the user is pro-vax or something like this. It's okay? And this is the data sets they analyze. This is how they construct the network. The network is the follower-following network, like in the previous case. And in Facebook, the network is, it's a user network, and they put an edge between two users if they co-commented the same post. If you have two users commenting the same post, there is a link between users. And this is the way they infer the leaning of this post. And in the post, the user in Twitter, they post a news, for instance, from the New York Times. They go to this page that is Media Bias Fact Check, that has a report not only of the political orientation of the media, here's more left-center bias, but also they have information about the reliability, it's okay, of the media. This is Breitbart, and Breitbart appeared when the first government of Trump, and this was very, very right far and very low reliable behavior. And this is the results. The results is like this. If you check the results, what they plot here, they plot the individual leaning of each user. They go user by user. They choose one user. Look who is the neighbors in the network, the nearest networks of this user. They average the leaning of the neighbors, and they plot a dot in the coordinate of the leaning of the user and the leaning of the average network. Okay? So if a user with a given ideology is surrounded by network with the same ideology, it got to be a dot there. And the density of the dots is going to be which is the collective behavior from this. And this is how they operationalize the signature of echo chamber. They say, we can measure echo chamber by doing this plot, because in this plot we have the bimodal distribution in the leaning of the user, but also I can see that all the users are basically surrounded by users with the same leaning, okay? And these two dots in the diagonal is a signature of echo chamber. And they can see here that they have echo chamber for the abortion discussion in Twitter, for the vaccine discussion in Facebook, but they don't look echo chambers from Reddit in the topic politics and for Gab in the Gab network. I don't know Gab, but if you send Reddit, the way Reddit organized the discussion is through subreddits or through different groups. So in the way Reddit constructs the social media, they are just segregating the user in conversation. So it's expected that it doesn't happen in Reddit, okay? And this is how this plot looks like for other topics: guns control, conspirations of science. This is post page from conspiracy and post from science, and this is the activity, the likes from post from the conspiracy page in Facebook. This is a very interesting topic. And this is the Obamacare in Twitter that also have echo chambers. So the other things they analyze is what they call homophilic interaction. So they analyze here the networks, that's what defined there, and they perform a community detection via the Louvain algorithm, okay? They identify the networks, and then in a similar way, the first paper I show you, the paper of Conover and a group of Filippo Menzer, they want to stand for how is the main ideology or the main the homogeneity of each cluster. So they calculate there the mean ideological leaning of each cluster. I mean, they have the leaning of all the integrantes of each cluster, and they calculate the average. And if the average turns to red, they have a Republican-like communities, and if turn to the Republican-like or pro-abortion, let's say pro-abortion, no, it's not Republican-like here, sorry. We have communities pro-abortion and communities against abortion. We have here communities anti-vaccines and communities pro-vaccines, okay? There is also a segregation in the ideology of the communities presented there. Finally, they would like to see how information diffuse just by applying one of the models that Silvio told us yesterday and Jesus told us earlier. They use a third model to study the diffusion of information in the sense that SRI is aware of the circulation of information, aware and willing to spread it further, and not ready to transmit it anymore. And basically, they start the simulation, the infection in one node, and they calculate how the information propagates. And they calculate when the information stops, they look for all the information nodes, they check the ideology, and compare the main ideology of the infected node against the ideology of the seed. Okay? If the information starts in one Republican user, then the information will spread not over the network or will be contained to Republican user. This is in this plot here. And that we have here that when the stance of the user, the seed leaning is negative, mainly the group of infected people when they reach the information is also negative, and when the seed is positive, the infected people is also positive. You can see here. This is for the status of Twitter. The same happened of Facebook, and of course, this is not the case for Reddit and Gab, okay? So they have consistent information using echo chambers, looking for homophilic interaction in the average stance of the communities, and also from the diffusion of information using this model. They also check the same for the news consumption, and they can see here that typically users from the right leaning tend to consume news from the right media and also from the left. This is clearly here in Facebook, but that is not in Twitter. So in this part, it's also start to deal with what happened or how is the way that user get informed. And this lead us to analyze another kind of network in which we are not analyzing the user, how the user interact among them or how they interact with political actors, but the way user interact with news and with media outlets. Okay. So the last part of this talk is related to see how can we quantify and we can analyze the news sharing behavior on social media, and this is the very important to analyze how people get informed and make his own public opinion. So the question we want to analyze here is, do users tend to form groups according to their preference in news consumption? I mean, there is echo chamber also in the way they get informed. In that case, what user of news feature are relevant of this process, and also what is the role of the political polarization in this process? Is it that kind of crossover between political leaning and the media the users choose to get informed? This topic was addressed first in these papers that they analyzed media sharing in the context of election in UK. This is in 2019. But I'm going to speak about a work based on data from Argentina, and data I share to you for the groups that are using the user news networks, and one of the projects of the Twitter, in which we collect data from users sharing news during a month. I forgot to translate it, but which kind of user we select? We select users with some political compromise, political activity. That we choose user based on the hashtag of the tweets they post, and they collect tweets, and they also collect a control group that does users that don't have any explicit political affiliation. And we focus on those tweets shared by the user that refers to news from the 20 main Argentina media outlets. And also, we did a comparison between that from a political year. In 2019 was a presidential election in Argentina. In 2020, there is not an election. So we want to compare these 2 years. When we go to the data, this is the data. This is a tweet with a links for a new. And we also can access to the text to this new and analyze the context of the news shared. And with this information, we use all the aggregates. We construct a bipartite networks in which in the red nodes, in the orange node, we have users, and in this color that I don't know which color is, maybe light brown, and we have news. And there is a link between two nodes. Is this user share this news? Right? This is a user that is sharing this news. The user 2 share news B or news D, and so on. And then, in order to analyze this data, you first, again, we represent, the bipartite network represents the whole collective behavior. So the next step is how we can analyze this collective behavior by analyzing the properties of the network. And we perform two kinds of analysis. The first one is the projection of this bipartite network in the news networks, in which basically here the news are the nodes are news, and the links encode the amount of users that co-share to news. Okay? And we also analyze the user networks, in which the nodes are users, and the links are related to the amount of news that are co-shared with both users. So, how the data looks like if we, for instance, plot the news network? It looks like this. What can we see? This is about 200,000 news in 2019, and same amount in the next year. And we're going to see here that we have a structure. This network has structure. Okay? These appear basically two big communities dominating this behavior. Almost the same happens there. What happens if we perform some community detection algorithms and paint the community with the color of the the partition. We can see here that this network is basically dominated with these two communities. In here, this network is dominated with these two communities, and this is more than 35% of the data that we analyze. So we have two communities that dominate the collective behavior. And so we restricted our analysis to these two big communities. So the question we address here is why this network looks like in this way. What they have in common? This is they group by the publication date, or they group by the content they share, or what. So what we did here is just scrapped all the content of the news and classify all the content via topic dictation. It means we put all the news together and say who is speaking about the politics, who is talking about another topic. We perform unsupervised topic dictation. I'm not going to give you the details, but you're interested in, and I can give you the details in some conversation. And this is a radar plot that is a distribution of the news in these topics. And we can see here that in this community, in the red community, the main topic of discussion was justice in 2019, but this was not justice in 2020. And the same happened here. There is more distribution in different topics here, but there's nothing to do with in the next year. I mean, it doesn't seem that the topics they are discussing has to be with this organization. So the next things we analyze is which are the media outlets where the news come from. And the media outlets, basically, in the red community, came from these two new media outlets, La Nación, Clarín, and Infobae, that are some center-right media outlets, and the other community was formed by news came from El Destape, Página 12 y Ámbito Financiero, that was some media outlets that are more center-left. And the same happened in the other year, and the same happened in the group control. So the people tend to group because they choose certain group of media outlets that are related with ideological position. This is the distribution in all the communities, and we can see here that there's a kind of polarization based in the media outlet they consume. So, does this polarization in terms of media has anything to do with political polarization? Well, we address this question by performing a sentiment analysis. So we have the text of the news sharing by all the users, and we choose those news in which the main candidate of the two political parties were mentioned, and we perform a sentiment analysis about if that mention was positive or negative. There were positive and negative mention for both of the candidates, and we calculate what we call sentiment bias, that was a balance between positive and negative mention of both candidates, but we have to be aware here that a positive sentiment bias, it means a support from the center-left coalition, and a negative sentiment bias means a support from the center-right. And the main result here, as of course that these communities were related, also we found a significant difference of sentiment bias, and also that they were related to the main political candidates. So this polarization in media consumption has to do with political polarization, and we address this question by performing sentiment analysis of the news mentioned the candidates. So how do we look for the user behavior? When we analyze the user behavior, this is the network. And this is how we color this. we have this activity of the user, and if we calculate the news shared, or where the media came from, the media outlet, they came from the news shared by the user, we can see that this polarization that we observe in the news layer is also present in the user layer. We also calculate the consistency of the cluster using a similar approach of the first paper I showed you, but basically calculating for each user the media vector, that it accounts for the number of articles that came from the main media outlets of Argentina. And we calculate the similarity matrix for each community, and we can see here the consistency of the community. So this is almost it. I just want to finish this talk by telling you that this method of latent ideology, which was applied in the paper of Barbara to the following follower networks, it can be applied to any other bipartite network. We can use this methodology to use different kind of bipartite networks. And this is, for instance, an application from the group of Hernán Maxe. Then they perform an analysis using the retweet network, how user retweet influencer, how is the political discussion in the United States using a political latent ideology approach, and they can see here that it's a bimodal distribution in the ideology calculating with this method. And they also use for non-political environments to calculate how the discussion about climate discussion that are centered in the reports of the discussion in Twitter about the dates related with the conference of parties, about climate change. They're two nice papers. We also use this to latent ideology approach to calculate the preference for users and how to relate with the ideology, the political ideology. And I can give you the paper in the list of papers I give you in the folder. Finally, this is a paper 1 month ago that they study also. They not restricted to Twitter and Facebook, but they analyze the mapping of the podcast ecosystems and try to analyze how the people consume this information from podcasts. Also, there is in the list, and this is a very nice paper to read. So I would like to thank my group. This is also the photo of the last barbecue in Buenos Aires in last December. Thank you. You can see here the page of our group. Thank you very much. Any question, I am open to answer. Mario, o para que te alcanzo el primero, para que le llevo el primero. Ariel.
Yes. So thank you for the class, first of all. In the plots that were showing the polarization, like for example with
echo
the
chambers, echo chambers?
Yes, the echo chambers. There are like different slopes for the 2 points. Do they bring any information?
No, they don't focus there. I don't know if there is any information there. Here.
Yes, like I was expecting somehow like the slope tells you that one is more echo chamber than the other or something like that.
I mean, even though they provide a method to compare different networks, you see that maybe there are some different relating when the way they calculate the leanings, for instance. And in Twitter, they focus they collect all the tweets of a user. For example, if they have here New York Times, they apply this. Well, okay, this New York Times. I go to media via fact check. I see what's the score is minus 0.5, minus 0.6, and if is I don't know, Fox News is plus 0.5. 4, and they average this. And this is, with these scales, with this way to infer the ideology, it's complicated that it goes far to the extremes. So you can see here there. But in Facebooks, they go to a user, and they have some post, okay? And the posts are labeled pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. If this pro-vaccine is +1, if the anti-vaccine is -1. And if they like this and they like this, they generally are labeling in this way. It's strange that if I pro-vaccine, just give like to anti-vaccine. So here is more go to the extremes. So that's why here is the slope is 1, but here the slope is not so clear. So maybe this difference are related with the way they calculate the leanings. That's my guess.
Okay, but for example, in the upper left, the slope of the two clouds is different.
Yes, it's different. Yes, but I don't know. Mario?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo, for the presentation. I have two curiosities, and the first one is, do you know if people that work with Twitter data, I know that this kind of data, not only Twitter, but in general, data from, scrapped from some...
This is a wrong question.
I didn't push anything.
Okay. Yes. Well, yes. By bots, for instance, yes. There is a web page called Botometer that you can check if that is pretty reliable in the field, and we can check if the tweets come from the user are human or bots. But having said that, the question is, as a researcher, should I include the bots because therefore they belong to the public conversation, or should I remove the bots because I consider that they should be removed? I'm not sure. There is another question? Yes. Yes, of course.
Thank you. And my second question or curiosity is, are you aware of some works that try to predict this polarity? For instance, even if we concentrate on the last image that was shown before the cutoff, I suppose that this polarity does not arise immediately.
No,
that should
also,
be constructed.
Yes, there is a work from Hernan Maxe. They develop. They just raise this question about if the outcome of elections can be predicted from the content of Twitter data. And they compared, this is a very nice paper, and they compare Twitter data and distribution, intention to vote, just using machine learning classification techniques, and how the people, they tag the people. And they also perform some resampling of the user profile because the density or the distribution of age and sex in Twitter is not the same that in the population, so they have to rescale. But they do a pretty nice job, and this is published in a paper of 2021. I can give it to you. You're welcome. No, doesn't matter. Yes, but there is another question? Yes.
Okay, when you're talking about Twitter and Facebook.
Yes.
Can you take into account the fact that the things that you are seeing are not being entirely decided by you? It's being decided by the recommendation algorithm. I mean, the algorithm tends to give things that he knows you already agree with that. So is there a way to account for this type of thing?
Well, in particular, in the paper of echo chambers, they address just this question. They say that the difference we see that are pretty related with the way of the algorithms present the information. Having said that, given that we don't have access to how is this filtering process, is pretty harder to do reverse engineering to know how is this kind of algorithm proposal. Okay, any other question? Okay, I think this is it. We can go to have lunch, and then we meet in the first floor to continue with the project, okay?